Well, it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and it's important to acknowledge the history here in Idaho. So joining us here today virtually is University of Idaho Associate Professor of History, Dr. Jedd Kyong-McClain. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all, here on the News at 4.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first, tell us a little bit about what you do at U of I.
Well, I am first off, associate, as you mentioned, associate professor of history in the history department here at the university, and in that area, I teach modern Chinese history. That's 20th century primarily, modern Korea, and also world history. So that's one side of my work here. The other is I'm also director of the Idaho Asia Institute, which is a center on campus that tries to promote Asian studies at the university and throughout the state of Idaho.
Wow.
So my own, research and teaching and the Asian Institute is more about Asia than about Asian America per se, but we do sometimes obviously engage with Asian America as well.
So for folks who might not be familiar right now, for them, what is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and why is it important to celebrate it this month specifically?
Yeah, so, for quite some time, at least since the 1970s, a number of senators and congresspeople had been advocating for some sort of formal recognition of Asian American Pacific Islander heritage, and a number of House resolutions were passed back in the 70s, and many of that, for a long time, there was some sort of nod towards it, but finally in 1990, a law was passed and signed by President George H.W. Bush declaring May Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And so since then, that's been a thing. And the main, there's a lot that could be unpacked. Why is it important to celebrate and study this month? Of course, anytime there's a month, you could say, well, you could make this into a whole year, of course. But the point is to draw attention to a significant portion of the U.S. population that contributed to American development and us as Americans becoming who we are. Right now, I don't know exact numbers, but you're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 8% of the American population falls within Asian American Pacific Islander heritage. So it's not, insubstantial. It's a significant group. And if you look back in history, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders have been involved with development of the U.S., pretty strongly since the mid-1800s and to some extent even before that. And so if we want to really understand who we are as Americans, how we got to where we are, where we're going in the future, it becomes very essential to understand that portion of our history.
You kind of just mentioned it, nationally, but what about here in Idaho and the history of Asian Americans here?
Yeah, one thing is probably evident to a lot of, might be just evident when you walk on the street. We don't quite meet the same, we don't have 8% of our population in that category as do, some, obviously California would be high and other states, varying places. Our Asian Americans, Pacific Islander, population is probably 2% or slightly below that. But nonetheless, still that's 2% of, Idahoans right now. And also, if you look back in history, which I'm, prone to do, we find that especially in the 19th century, Asian Americans contributed heavily to, the development of our state, the economy in the late 1800s. And I'm speaking, most famously in the form of mining, Chinese miners, and also, somewhat less, but also important contributions to building the railroad through northern Idaho. And so, so there's there's obviously a strong historical connection. And then too, just thinking, in Idaho, the future, ever since 1965 Immigration Act opened up, our whole nation to immigrants without, any regards to race. Makes it such that Idaho is again probably not first on the top of people's minds as a place to emigrate to, off the top of their heads. But, it is a place in which people are going to and, have been looking for, where to build a family and a life. And so, we can obviously imagine in the near future there will be more, Asian American Pacific Islanders here in our state contributing to making this a great place to live. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk any more detail if you want to about history, what I do best, but that's kind of a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm kind of a living testament to it, being here and being an Idahoan. All right, well, thank you so much, Dr. Jedd Kyong-McClain, for joining us here on the News at 4. We really appreciate it. We'll be right back.